This week's podcast is sponsored by Top Design Consultancy.
Looking to elevate the ordinary into extraordinary through branded experiences.
Visit www.wearetap.ie or email hello@wearetap.ie for more information.
I started my first business in school, actually, and it wasn't hugely successful. It was a Bookies. So I was running a Bookies in junior school, and I remember it well because of the stress of it. I think culture is what happens when the boss isn't there. I think culture actually comes from the team, not so much from the boss. I want this to be very clearly said. All the time that I was in business, from the very beginning, it was about a team of people, and I was in that team. I had great people. So actually me moving out of the business to do those weeks away didn't make the slightest difference to the business. Some would say they ran better without me. Kith & Kin is an independent network of creative agencies. And within that, we have Pluto, who are based in Dublin, and our creative brand experience business, TAC, which are based in Dublin and expertly integrate brand and environment. The recession that hit in 2009 and 2010 was absolutely savage. And that became a survival game. And you guys certainly wouldn't be talking to me on this podcast.
Does AI scare you, Colin?
Colin, briefly, how does the Kith and Kin group of companies help other businesses?
Well, I'd like to think what we do is we help them up their top line and grow their bottom line by basically looking at what they're doing with their branding and trying to figure out ways of improving their marketing or improving their communication and building their brand. All the companies have crossovers and all the companies do similar things in some respects, but they all have this in common. We're actually very fond of SMEs and smaller businesses. And I think we're very much on the basis of trying to keep it simple, trying to keep it jargon free, and actually just delivering for the clients. And an awful lot of the time that means asking questions to try and figure out what the problem is. Sometimes you've got a brand that needs to be taken more seriously in the marketplace. Maybe they've got a very big competitor, an international competitor, and they need to work hard and sort of and gain attention. Or other times, sometimes we can deal with the biggest brands in the world, and what they want to do is they want to resonate with the client or they want to make an impact. And I think all the businesses who are completely independent all have that kind of similar ethos, which is very much, you won't survive as a business in the long term unless you're producing a return on investment. So I think it's really important that whatever marketing spends people have, huge budgets or small budgets, they're seeing a return on that.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to kind of getting into detail on that a little later. But what did you do, Colin, before you started your first business?
So I guess if I went back, I started my first business in school, actually, and it wasn't hugely successful. It was a Bookies. So I was running a Bookies in junior school with a guy called Robert Brennan. And I remember it well because of the stress of it. What used to happen was we would get the racing paper and we would get people to pick horses and they would bet on them. And the funny thing about that was they were always betting on horses like Lucky Jim and those kind of cool names that people liked because we're only kids. And so that was all fine, but they'd all be about 16 or 20 to 1. So my mother noticed I was very panicked and stressed listening to the BBC Radio 2 racing results every evening, because if Lucky Jim came in, we were cleaned out. Actually, we made money, I'm glad to say, but the stress of it was killing me. So eventually I just said, no, we can't keep doing this. And we stopped it. So that was my very first business.
Brilliant. Good stuff. So you always kept enough aside anyway, just in case.
Yes, yeah. Well, it was stressful, but what I would say is it was enjoyable because of the hustle bustle of it, and I kind of enjoyed that part. But the stress of it was a little too much for an 11-year-old, and I have to say I wasn't unhappy when we wound it up.
If you're looking back in that, Colin, where does the mindset to start a business or start something yourself that early come from?
That's a good question. I had this weird, I was one of those strange kids in school. I wasn't unpopular. I was chatty and bold and I got on pretty well with people. I don't think teachers loved me that much, and I wasn't very good academically. But I told people from a very early age that I was going to be a businessman. And actually, I told anyone that was interested I'd be a millionaire by the time I was 21. And actually, at 21, I had a bit of a moment because I was selling insurance disc holders and tax disc holders that you see on the inside of your windscreen. I was selling them door to door to garages that couldn't sell cars. So it was the worst possible job. I was earning 77 pounds a week, punts a week, and I had no money in the bank. So I was as far from being a millionaire as a 21-year-old could be. So I decided to give up on that just on my 21st birthday. But I think if you'd asked me at 19 or 18, I probably still would have believed I'd be a millionaire at 21. So I had this sort of complete belief that I'd be a successful businessman. And I did find as I was working for other people that really getting your worth was probably almost impossible unless you were prepared to take a chance and run your own business. So I genuinely thought I would be a businessman, and I was completely certain that I would be successful. And life started to chip away at that optimism to the point where when I started my business at 25, I actually didn't have the optimism and the certainty that I had as a younger boy.
And did you go to college?
I went, did a good inter, which shocked everyone. And then I did a bad leaving, which disappointed me anyway. And then I went to the College of Marketing. And actually, funny enough, that was kind of a story about resilience as well, because I had to go to an interview to get into the College of Marketing. And I arrived back from our 2-week holiday in Ibiza that morning. So I went straight from the airport, still the wrong side of quite a number of pints the night before. And I went straight into the interview. My mum met me at the airport. I threw on the only tin of fruit I had, and I went into the interview. And because I was still half cut, I thought I did a brilliant interview, and I thought I got on brilliantly with your man. But the letter of acceptance never came. And then I was left with nothing. So I had no college, I had nothing. So I got onto a trainee manager course in McInerney's, the builders, and I was working in Tala. And that was the hardest work I'd ever done in my life. It was a nightmare. It was like we used to work in spilling rain. It was awful weather. And on the day of my debs, I decided after I had the next day off because my debs was on. So the next day I went in and I met a guy called Phil Flood who'd interviewed me. I just doorstopped him and I just went in. This was like in November, mid-November. And I said, listen, Philip, I know I didn't get into the college, but is there anybody that didn't take their place that maybe I could take their place because I really want to go and study marketing? And he said, Colin, I liked you at the interview and I wrote the letter myself. Unfortunately, in those days, Post didn't deliver everything. So it didn't get to me. And I said, well, do I have a place? Like, is my place gone? And he said, no, there's a place for you. It's there. It was reserved for you. So the next Monday, I quit. On the Friday afternoon, I drove to Tala and quit. And on the Monday, I started college.
Brilliant experience. All shape you up to be probably the person you are today.
Well, I think the bit that kind of certainly resonated with me now looking back was the fact that I tried again. I think that became a big thing for me in terms of business because like I promise you, there's no magic gifts you're going to hear about today. I'm a pretty, ordinary guy, but I do have a bit of resilience and I do try hard. So I think I remember one time I was on a horse riding thing. Weirdly, I was on a horse riding thing, and I was on a horse. It was one of these kind of half Shetland, half pony things, but I thought it was a racehorse, so no other horse could pass it by without it bolting, basically, to try and stay ahead of the other horse. And it was only as I was getting off it, I figured I'm a bit like that. Like other horses are better than me and other people are better than me, but I'm always determined to try and keep up. And I think that horse and me had a bit in common. And I think when I brought that to business, hand on heart, I always felt like I wasn't probably as good as some other people or as talented as other people, but I wasn't going to be found for wanting to work hard or try hard.
Really insightful. And I love the fact that you went back to the college just to check to see if there was another chance you could divorce, because I think that's that it's quite important with sales as well, that you don't take no as an answer for the first time.
Well, that was part of it. And also the work was so bloody hard on that site in Tala. I think it was Jobestown in Tala that McInerney's were building at the time. Like that was really hard work. So to me, like the thought of college was absolutely amazing. And I just was determined to try again. As it happened, weirdly, 2 years later, I did the certificate in marketing and I got what I needed to get into diploma. And then if you got a diploma, you could get a degree. But I actually chose to leave marketing college after 2 years. I still can't figure that one out. I don't know why I did that, but I was kind of fed up being broke and I hated being broke all the time. So eventually I just said, no, I have to get out into the workforce. And I couldn't get a job, funny enough, because in those days, jobs were extremely hard to find. You're talking about the mid-80s when almost everyone emigrated. But I was lucky enough to meet a lot of friends in college. Some of them I'm still friends with now. And I also met my partner in business and in life, Fiona. So we met in college. So I was very lucky that I did get into that college. But when I left it and she left at the same time, I couldn't get into the workforce. So I did what they called, in those days, it's now FOSS, but it was an ANCO course. And I did a 10-month ANCO course with some very bright guys who'd like got honors BComs and best degrees. And we were all doing this sales management course actually in Leeson Park in Renlow, where I'm based now, ironically. And we did this course really just to be able to get paid, because they paid you to do the course, if you know what I mean. And I was lucky enough to live in Wicklow, so I got a decent payment. Actually, I think it was about 70 or 80 quid. So I was getting that every week to study. So to be honest, the study was easy and the money was okay. So I quite enjoyed that. And weirdly, the real attraction of that course was they guaranteed you that you'd get at least 3 interviews. And the 3 interviews were for salesy type jobs, which was going to suit me. And the first job was a really bad job. It was selling black plastic bags on the back of a Honda 50 door to door in industrial estates. So, and it was for 50 quid a week. So I said, not in a month of Sundays am I going to do this job, but I'll do the interview as best I can for practice. And to my absolute amazement, I didn't get the job. So I couldn't even get a job at 50 quid a week on the back of I was riding a Honda 50 selling black plastic bags. And that was such a shock that I went, oh my God. And the next job up was actually a van, and I was selling tax disc holders and insurance disc holders around the country. And compared to this Honda 50, that was like a really move up. And I actually managed to, against the rest of the class, I managed to get that job. And I did that job for a year. It was really hard, but it was, in those days, you just took what you could.
Yeah, I think sometimes you need to see what you don't like to do, and that kind of shows you what you do want to do. But if we can maybe, Colin, get into the business you started, what were the first 2 years of that like?
So what happened was I worked in that small business selling stuff, and then I got taken on by another proper printing company, and I worked for them for about 3 years, and I was really happy there. But what happened was I got offered a lot of money to move another big printing company, and I was half and half about it. So what happened was I gave in my notice because the money that was on offer was so good. The guys came back to me in a company called Marksell, where I'd worked for 3 years happily and I really liked. And they offered me a directorship and a very small percentage a year on if I stuck with them. And they offered me a raise. And the whole thing was a lovely package. But weirdly, they had kind of thrown it at me in a way that they were feeling very aggrieved. And I learned from that in terms of how you do things. I just felt that I had pushed them to the point where they were uncomfortable and they were a bit angry about the fact that they were having to do this. So I left anyway. And that turned out to be a very important decision, because I went to a company that wasn't as good and I didn't like as much. I learned an awful lot in the company I didn't like, about how not to do things, about how you could do things better. The company I'd worked in that were very good, Marksell, I didn't really learn that much because your job was to sell and everything else was kind of done for you. Whereas in the job I moved to, I had to try and make everything happen and make things work. And it was really good learning for me. But apparently when I was working for Marksell, I had talked about running my own business a lot. Now, why I did that to an employer is genuinely beyond me. I obviously wasn't the brightest, but they remembered that. And a year after I left, they came to me and said, listen, would you be interested in doing what you talked about and starting your own business? And if you were, we would partly back that. So that gave me an opportunity. I was 24 when we had that conversation that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And it also gave me a little bit of confidence because they'd seen me working and had felt that I might be able to do this. So I think those two things probably combined with me doing something much earlier than I would have done if I'd been left on my own.
That's really unusual that, yeah, your employer was backing you to start your own business.
They came to me and they came to me with what was a very fair offer where they would put in money for a percentage. Some designers came on board and took the kind of middle shareholding, and then I owned about 40% as well. So it was 40, 40, 20 effectively. And we started a company, a Me Too printing company called The Printed Image on the 1st of November, 1990.
Brilliant. So that was yourself and 2 other shareholders.
Yes, but the shareholders were kind of silent back in the background. Shareholders. We started the business. There was myself and 5 others, so there was a team of 6 of us in the Printed Image on day one.
Right. So you've fulfilled the start of the dream, becoming self-employed. What were the first 2 years like then after setting up the company?
So when we were quiet, right, we used to wash the windows, and we had the cleanest windows in the whole of Ireland. It was incredible how clean our windows were because we had no work. And the funny thing about the setup was it had been a printing company, and then we had taken a third of that space. And my office had a glass wall right onto onto the factory floor. It was only 3,000 square feet, which I think would be the size of a house, really, wouldn't it? And so we had 3 printing machines, we had 3 printers, we had a nipper, we had a production director, and we'd me, and that was it. But they could look in the window at me when they had nothing to do, and they'd clean the windows. So the pressure on me was immense to actually do something. And sometimes you'd find yourself picking up the phone, a bit like you see football managers making a substitution when they're losing to make sure they look like they know what they're doing. It was a bit like that with me. I was ringing people just to make sure they knew I was trying. But we turned over in the first year 400,000 euros. And like my sales had been twice that in terms of where I'd been. So it was a really poor performance, if I'm honest. But we managed to make 40,000 euros profit. And once we got through the first year, the wheels started to turn. So it becomes easier. And I'd say to anybody who's at that point where they're struggling a little bit in the early part of it, it does get easier. And in my case, for example, when I used to sell tax discs or insurance disc holders, if I sold something in Roscrea, that's 1 garage out of the way. I'm now down to 3. Then I'd sell another garage. Then I'm down to 2. Like it became a smaller and smaller market. What I loved about the printing business was if I picked up a customer, I'd have that customer and I can go get another customer, keep that one happy, get on to the next one, the next one. So by the end of the first year, we had 15 or 16 customers, 1 big one and an awful lot of small ones. The next year became that much easier, and the next year after that became easier again. So what ended up happening was we ended up building up a bit of momentum, and we started to become quite successful to the point where we were taking on people and we were picking up customers. And I think we were finding that we were doing a job a little bit better than the existing market was. And customers appreciated the fact that we showed up on time, delivered on time, and we tried to be very much like solve all problems, that kind of an approach. We called it delighting the customer, and we kept that going for many years, where that was our mantra. We were trying to delight them, not just please them, delight them.
If you're looking back on that, Colin, did you have a vision of where you saw the company going?
I'd be lying if I said I saw it growing big, like huge or anything like that. I wanted it to be successful. I wanted it to grow. I definitely had ambition for it to be, I tell you what I wanted really. I wanted it to be the best we could make it. And that was, to me, was the ambition. I had no real idea of size. To me, the bigger companies looked absolutely massive and out of sight, and that we could only be a certain size. And there was an awful lot of sort of medium-sized printing companies. And I suppose I wanted to be at the top of that pile. But interestingly, after a couple of years, I had noticed in the print industry something very strange. Actually, I should say, just in case anyone's listening from that industry, the print industry was incredibly good to me, and I owe them a lot, because I wouldn't be where I am or had the success I have if the print industry wasn't open and a place where somebody new could come in and compete. But we did something which was unusual. At the time I was selling print, we used to go around with portfolios, huge big A1 portfolios, and show the work to the client. It was ridiculous, really, the way we were doing it. We were going, look how great we are, and here's stuff all over your desk to prove it. But what we should have been doing is going, what do you need, and how could we solve your problems, which we didn't do. But the weird thing about it was we entered it into a thing called the Printer of the Year, which was the trade awards. And a small printing company had never won overall Printer of the Year. But we ended up winning our category, which was small printer. And myself and my very talented production director, Brian Fay, the two of us went and got hammered. And instead of that, we should have been paying attention. And at the end of the night, we weren't even listening when they announced the winner, because the small printer really didn't win the big thing. Anyway, we won overall Printer of the Year in 1993. And that was genuinely shocking to me. It also woke the market up to the fact that we were pretty good, and we rocketed the year after that and the year after that. So that became, doing that brochure, entering that competition, winning that award. When I look back on it, it turned out to be quite an important part of maybe making our own luck and being successful.
It's a nice reward and nice start to, what was that, within 2 years you got the award?
So yes, it was. And it was really, and actually funny enough, we went along to the awards many years in a row after that. We won nothing, but we just presumed you'd win most years because of the way it had worked out. But we learned that it's a harder thing to win than it looked. But winning at that time, I think, gave me more, I think it gave me a bit more ambition. And I think it was the next year that I did a small business course up in the IMI, and I started to think a little bigger. And actually, I think we started to annoy one of our shareholders who were in the print game as well. And they started to get less and less happy with our progress, even though they were shareholders, because I think they saw us as coming up on the rails, if you like.
What was TPI, or what was it at the start?
Well, it is now still, I'm glad to say, a really, really creative printing and design business. It does an awful lot more now than it used to do. I don't own it anymore, but what I would say is it's still very much a marketing services business. And we had a very much a can-do attitude. Like, we had a very high service level. We were very determined to do whatever needed to be done. So we were very quick into things. For example, we opened a design part to the business when most printing companies felt that that would mean designers wouldn't deal with you and ad agencies wouldn't deal with you. So it was looked on as almost like a thing you shouldn't do. But we opened a design section. Then we got into logistics. We did a little bit of packing, pick and pack and delivery, and almost became like a solutions provider rather than just a Me Too printing company. And I think as we grew our facility size wise. We went from, I think we changed factory 3 times and we got bigger each time. We offered more services. And I think we became sort of part of the furniture and marketing departments in the likes of Britvic and Coca-Cola and Heineken and really good companies like that, where they were very comfortable that we were like their partner, especially in the area of point of sale, which is kind of a specialist area within the print game. Effectively what you'd see in a supermarket, you know, the backboards and the stuff telling about special offers and those kind of things. We got very, very good at that particular type of printing.
So, Colin, if we could go into those kind of growth strategies that you had, if you could explain some of them to us.
Well, a lot of the time they were kind of customer led. I remember we were very early on, we printed CRH's annual report. And I noticed that they basically used to print far more than they would send to the shareholders. So I asked them what they were doing with those, and they were putting them into storage. So I said to them, well, could we do the storage for you, and we'll store them and charge you a price per pallet? And we did a deal, and that was agreed. And that's the kind of way that we got into growth strategies, if you like. If you were spending money on a design, we could say to you, well, look, we could do the design for you, do it quite cost effectively and do it very efficiently. And also the synergies of having the design and the print in the one place means you're dealing with one person rather than 2 or 3. That was the way we moved. So there was nothing revolutionary about what we were doing. We were basically looking further up the chain or further down the chain and figuring out what we could do. So for example, something simple like sending it around the country and putting it packed per rec or per merchandiser for Coca-Cola made their lives so much easier than having to organize that for themselves. So they found that we would send it across their depots. Then their merchandisers would come into their countrywide depots and collect what they needed to be collected. Even to the point that at the end, we would have done audits to see who was actually taking the packs and who were just leaving them, you know, on the pallets unused. I remember one time we took back a lot of pallets and we recycled that because like it was stuff that was unused. But again, it was common sense to think, well, what else could be done? What hadn't had a logo change? What could be reused and repackaged? So we just basically moved up and down the value chain to try and offer customers a little bit more. And I can't claim, and I never claimed we had any eureka moments that said, let's do this. And, you know, it'd be absolutely incredible. We noticed, for example, that in publicity gifts, merchandise, there was oftentimes a promotion absolutely reliant on a piece of merchandise that then didn't come in and ruined the promotion for say Lucozade as an example. So then we started supplying footballs and things like that to the brands alongside the point of sale to try and come up with a better solution. We got to the point where we were even able to come up with the actual promotion. So in other words, we would suggest things to the client that they would think about doing or not doing. Again, we were pretty good at things like in-store theatre, where we would make a real wow effect from the stuff that we were putting into the stores. So we would design it and engineer it so that it would catch the eye and maybe sell products.
So the TPI group grew, Colin, and became more than printing image. So can you talk us through maybe how some key milestones in that growth?
Sure. So we grew pretty steadily and we bought an excellent company called McGill Print. Alex McGill was our chairman for many, many years after that, and he was a huge addition to the team. Great guy. We bought his business first, so that gave us a little bit of growth over and above our organic growth. And then, do you remember I mentioned there was a company that had basically played an integral part in starting the business? I bought them out over a number of years. It was a very difficult buyout actually because we were in the same industry and they didn't really want to sell. So anyway, we came to a deal where they asked for the value of the business then and the same value again 5 years later, which at the time seemed criminal to me, but actually it turned out to work out quite well because the profits in the company basically paid them the first time and the second time. But by the time we got to the point where we were actually totally independent and myself and my wife owned the business, they came up for sale and they gave us first refusal. So we bought a company called Marksell, Hobson Morris, who had backed us originally. So the two companies had turnover of around 6 million and we brought them together. And actually, I think this is a good lesson for people, for some people. I was told, bring them together, make the cost savings, make more money. But I thought they were good at what they did and we were good at what we did. So we ran the companies separately for 3 years to learn what both companies were doing well. And only then did we bring them together into a wonderful factory in Fonthill. We built a purpose-built, really world-class HQ, and we brought them together under one roof in 2005. And at that stage, basically, we got to pay off some bills. We were incredibly lucky because the recession that hit in 2009 and 2010 was absolutely savage. And that became a survival game to the point where we had to cut. I think there was 30 people had to leave the business, and that was the start of the cutting. And then we had to cut our wages twice the following year, 5% at the beginning and 5% at the end of the year. So these were really savage cuts, and there had been the first time that the business had to take a step back. But if we had not made those decisions and done them well, I don't think we would be in business, and you guys certainly wouldn't be talking to me on this podcast. What I would say is what ended up happening, our industry contracted massively, and by 2011 and 2012 we had survived, but only just. But it was a lot easier because there was a lot less competitors, and we then started to think, hang on a minute, we were sitting on our laurels in 2005 and 2006 just doing what we were doing. That's not good enough. We need to look far wider to figure out what the future of the business looks like. So I did a thing called Leadership for Growth with EI, which I would recommend anyone that can get on it, get on it. It's a fabulous course.
Enterprise Ireland.
It's their best, it's their flagship course. It's their best course. And what I would say to you is they take you out of your business 3 times for a week. In my case, it was over to Lucerne in Switzerland. So my family all thought I was on a jolly, but they work you from about 8 o'clock in the morning till about 9 o'clock at night, and you come back exhausted. But what I would say is the 3 weeks out gave me a very clear picture that sitting on what we were doing and continuing to do it was absolutely guaranteed to fail over time. They exposed us to the kind of case studies like, I don't know whether you're aware of Kodak, but Kodak were a world-class brand when I was a kid and when I was a student, and would have been in that book I mentioned, Search of Excellence. What happened was, bizarrely, they actually developed the digital camera, but they were making so much money from film and the traditional camera, the way of making pictures, they buried it. They basically buried it. Fuji designed it and brought it to the marketplace, and then digital cameras took over. So Kodak, from being one of the world's greatest companies, went bust. And I was looking in a small way at us and thinking to ourselves, just sticking with print and design and even logistics and merchandise, it wasn't enough, and we needed to do more. So when I came back off that course after a long sort of thought process, I decided I wanted to get into marketing services and agencies and other areas that we could offer the same customer base or a similar customer base, different solutions.
Just before we kind of get into detail about that, Colin, like doing that course and running your business, how did you prioritize tasks?
Well, I was very lucky, and I really genuinely was, and I want this to be very clearly said. All the time that I was in business, from the very beginning, it was about a team of people, and I was in that team. I had great people. So actually, me moving out of the business to do those weeks away didn't make the slightest difference to the business. If some would say they ran better without me. What I would say to you is, I had a brilliant team. I did one thing that I think everyone in business, especially leaders, should do. I wasn't unaware of what I did badly. So I made sure I had people around me that did really good jobs. So when I wasn't there, to be honest with you, the business ran really, really well. Also, we were at a size then that we could afford a good management team, and we had a brilliant board, a really well thought out strategy of how we did what we did. So me going off and looking at the bigger picture didn't make a difference to the day-to-day running of the business. That's really hard when you're small. It's much easier when you get bigger. And what I would say is it's needed even when you're small. So find ways to get a day away, a half a day away, take your team away for a little bit of strategy. Because if you don't do it, you're really just reacting to what happens. Whereas if you do it the other way and say, well, what should we do? I came away from that time away. 3 weeks doesn't sound like a lot over 18 months. They were spread over different modules. But I came away from that with a very clear picture that I wouldn't do what we've been doing. And I think it was important that that happened, because I don't believe we would have done a huge amount of good in the next 10 years had we not had that happen.
Really interesting with the having built such a team that you were able to step away from the business. But I suppose you weren't always that big and you didn't always have that good of a team. So how did you go about building a team where you felt comfortable leaving the business and working on strategy?
One thing I really believed in was it was important to know where you were. And when we started first, our numbers, I told you, they were very small at the beginning. I remember getting an accountant as a nixer to do a job for me on our first quarter to tell me whether we broke even, lost money. And that was Q1 of year one. So as soon as I could afford a financial controller, which was probably when we had 10 or 12 people, I took on a finance person, even though probably it wasn't a fully qualified accountant, but it was a financial controller. I knew I had to have an excellent production person, because I'm not a production person. I get bored by production. So I needed a really good production person. And after a year, I was very lucky to trip into a guy came in for an interview that we couldn't afford. And my existing production director left, handed in his notice the same day I interviewed this guy. And his name is Brian Fay, and he was just brilliant at handling all the problems that come with production. He was unbelievably good at that. And I had a good finance person. So if I had a good finance person, a good production person, I was good at sales, I was good at marketing, and I could handle those things. But I think all the way through, even at the beginning, I was looking at what I was bad at and trying to make sure I got those hires right. So I think that was important from the off. I actually went around some of my old management team there about a year ago, and I met a few of them, and I asked them a question which I thought was interesting. Why did you work so hard? And I was curious as to why they worked as hard as they did. And I wasn't sure what the answer would be. And actually, funny enough, do you know what they said? They didn't say it had anything to do with me at all. They said everyone else worked hard. So when you joined the business, it was a hard working business, and you either wanted to leave or you wanted to stay. And I thought that was an interesting thing. I think 3 of them said it, that basically everyone else worked hard. So I felt I had to work hard, and I did. So it had nothing to do with me telling them to work hard, or maybe even me setting an example. It was the fact that they were on a team, and that team worked hard. And I think that's really important for a leader or a manager. Make sure there's nobody pulling the wool, slacking off, not doing their job. And if they do, it doesn't matter how popular they are, how much you like them, do something about that, because that can be corrosive. It can make a terrible difference over time. If you have a negative, or in Pluto they call him Tony the Money Pony. If you've Tony the Money Pony having his way in the staff canteen on a regular basis, it not only does it make the job harder for everyone around you, but it makes your job impossible, because you'll go in and do a rah, come on guys, we can do better speech. And as soon as you walk out the door, they'll turn around and go, it's easy for him to say, the shagger. Like that's what happens. And I think people like that are very corrosive. I can't say that we never had them. We did. But I'd like to say that very few of them stayed and very few of them lasted. And I would like to think that that was almost like a natural selection amongst the quality people that I had, because hand on heart, this was a team effort from the very beginning.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it kind of comes down to then building a good team is about you setting a good culture and not accepting anything.
Well, can I challenge that just for a minute? I think culture is what happens when the boss isn't there. I think culture actually comes from the team, not so much from the boss. So it's funny. I think the boss gets the credit for a good culture, but in my experience, the culture comes from the people. I guess you're the person who picks them, so that's the important part. But the culture is actually made when you're not there. So I find, for example, like if I in any way worried about how we performed when I wasn't there, I would have been there all the time. So then I couldn't have gone out to meet customers and do the things that I should have been doing. I knew that what was being done when I wasn't there was just as good as when I was there. And that came from the culture of the people and the team. And I think your job is to watch out when it's wrong. and watch out when it's not good, and make sure that everyone understands how important it is. Because I've never taken credit for culture. I think culture comes from the people that you've chosen interacting with each other. And it's really important you police it, but you don't create it.
And how do you go about hiring then? What do you look for? What's the number one thing that you look for in someone that you know they'll create that culture?
So, well, I tell you the truth. I'm a sucker for a good interviewee. That's the truth. So, if you come in and you give me both barrels in an interview, I'm probably eating out of the palm of your hand. So I'm pretty bad at hiring people, if I'm honest. We got so bad at picking people at one stage. I was wheeled in at the end when we were bigger. I was wheeled in sometimes for the last two. And because we picked a couple of bad ones in a row, I said to Adrian, who was running HR at the time, I said, Adrian, let's pick the one we don't pick. And she went, what are you talking about? I said, we'll pick one and then we hire the other because we keep getting it wrong. So maybe what we need to do is hire the number two and we'll get better with it. And we did, and it worked. I would say the reason I got so many good people was because I trusted other people to hire ahead of me, because I was very easily influenced in interviews. If you gave me a real both barrels approach to an interview, I'd probably hire you. And it wasn't always the right people. I think what happened was those people that weren't right left quite quickly because they didn't like what they saw, which was a very hardworking, no bitchiness type of attitude to the business. And I think people who weren't feeling the love there or didn't feel comfortable there, they went along. So I wouldn't say we always picked the right people, but I think we kept the right people. I think that was the most important part.
So I'd like to go back to one really interesting thing you said, Colin. When I asked, what does Kith and Kin do? And it kind of leads into like asking how TPI/Kith and Kin, were so successful. And you mentioned that for all your clients, they have to see a profit gain or return on investment. How do you measure that?
It's very difficult, and you have to hustle to try and get it, because a lot of the time the information isn't there, or they don't want to give it to you, or they're not very, it's not in their culture to share it that way. But what I would say is the key thing to remember is if you're not actually creating value for the client or the customer, you're not going to last long term. So it's a very important thing that you do everything you can to find out that you're making a difference to the client. And I'll give you an example from our Bloom, which is an advertising and marketing agency. They came to their client, who is Citroen, and they came with the concept that there's a lot of people with bad backs in the country and you've got the best suspension. We should do a promotion on the basis of the fact that this is the best car for you if you have a bad back. The stats, the number of people with a bad back in Ireland is absolutely incredible. It's hundreds of thousands. So they ran a promotion on that. They did a digital campaign and a radio campaign, and it worked very, very well. And the sales of the car went up significantly. I won't give you the numbers, but it was very, very big. And what I would say is, if we want to keep them as a client, we have to consistently make a difference to them and their sales and the amount of people who test drive their cars. And if we don't do that, they'll find someone else that will. So I think it's really important. Pluto do it, TAP do it, ZPS do it, VAS do it. Make a quantifiable difference to the client, and the client is more than happy to use some of their valuable marketing spend with you. But if you're just spending money and it's not really focused and it's not really thought out and it's not really value for money, there's so many other suppliers out there that can do something similar. They will move the business and you will lose it. Like we had Britvic for 22 years, we'd Coca-Cola for 20 years, we'd Heineken for 20 years, we'd some businesses from the beginning to now, like literally 30 something years, 33 years. And I don't believe that any of them would have stayed with us if we weren't actually showing them real value for money. And I think this idea that good salesmanship or good marketing will get you a load of business, it might do initially, but do you always want to be doing new business all the time? Because that's what you'll be doing if you're not delivering.
So COVID strikes, and obviously it's initially a very tough time for them. Can you talk us through the sale of the company and how you came about taking that decision?
Yeah, so I found myself, I think we did a good job of getting through the recession. I think we did a good job of diversifying the business. And it was coming up to basically 30 years in business. And I was feeling a little bit like I think it needed a fresh voice. I think I'd used up a lot of passion, and I think I'd also worn a couple of people out. And I was in a position where I was feeling I would like to do something different. So what I did was I looked around at the options and I tried to sell the business. And my idea was I'd sell the printing business, my baby, if you like, and I would concentrate on the other smaller agencies and try and grow them into something a little bigger and a little better. So what happened was I put it up for sale unofficially and off the market and quietly, and it didn't really draw an awful lot of attention. And I mentioned to you before about trees don't grow to the sky. I think we'd let it to the point where our industry was commoditizing. And even though we were still good at what we did, I think our industry took the view that if I was selling, they weren't buying. And I also think that outside of that, people were looking a little bit negatively about the future of print. Environmental issues were starting to become very, very prominent. And I think people felt, and our customers told us, they were trying to print as little as they could, and they were trying to reduce their spend in our area. So it became very difficult to see an exit. So I wasn't sure what I should do. And then unluckily, COVID came along, which caused a huge amount of trouble in the industry. It literally stopped everything for a while. And then we started to fight back and come back and do better. And at that same time, I was still looking for an exit. And bravely, my management team said, well, look, if you were looking to sell it, we would look to try and put a package together to buy it. And it wasn't, it was a very difficult time to do a deal. And to be fair to them, they took a chance, when an awful lot of people wouldn't have. But it was an exit that I got my time back and I got my factory back, and they got a business that I think is a sustainable and very well run and very well put together business. And so it continued on under their management, and the right people bought it and owned it. So I was very comfortable about the exit. It wasn't any massive exit or anything like that, but it was a nice way to come to a conclusion for me. And I genuinely wanted the business to continue and be successful.
That feeling of when you've put so much work into a business 30 years, what's it like when, as you said, let your baby go?
You know what? It's a weird feeling. It's a real mixture of things. I felt relieved that the deal was done, and I felt relieved that we had, that I had found a way of exiting what I felt successfully from a business that I put my heart and soul into. But you do feel like you've lost a limb. It's a weird thing. And so I think I did one thing right. And I know the guys who bought it probably felt it was a bit severe, but I really kept away from it completely. So I had read quite a number of things about people who had stayed on too long. I knew, for example, that there was a story about a guy called O'Farrell who basically took over from Matt Busby in Manchester United. And when he came in to go into his office, he went down to where Matt's office Sir Matt's office was, and Sir Matt was still there. And he went, "You're in my office." And he went, "No, this is still my office. Your office is upstairs." And I'd made mistakes like that in the past. So I was conscious that if they were to make a success of it, they should be left completely Colin Culliton free. And I did. It was hard, I have to say, but I really did sort of cut it away, even though it would have been easier to drop in and say hi and all that kind of stuff. But I knew, human nature being as it was, I just felt the best way to do it was to move on and to leave them to it. And they did a very, very good job of making a success of it. So I think I did the right thing.
So you sold 100% of the print. So how is that different to, so you've done loads of other sales before, but they weren't management buyouts. How is a management
No,
buyout?
I've done lots of, I'm better at buying companies than I do more buying of companies than selling them. I've only really sold one, and that was that one to the management team. I bought a number of companies, and they're quite stressful and difficult. And to be fair, they're brilliant. I mean, when they work out as they did most of the time for us, they're really, really enjoyable. But they tend to be very difficult and stressful negotiations. And this was no different. Just because we'd worked together, like it's very difficult for the management team to be, to suddenly, deal with what effectively is a seller as a buyer when we're all working together in the same building and had been colleagues for many years. So it's a weird one. It's a weird dynamic. But I think if you try and remember, I think the old adage about leave a pound in it for the other guy, you've got to have a little bit of goodwill and flexibility. I've always said to anyone who's asked my advice, and I helped a company sell, a label company sell their business at one stage. I always think it's very important that you leave a bit at the end, because at the end, the lawyers get involved and they start telling you how unfair somebody is about being in this way and that way. And if there's no goodwill left when you go into the final negotiations, the deal won't happen. Like, I think you need a little bit of you need it priced in a way that you can be a little bit flexible, and you also need to be flexible on small things that come up at the end, because sometimes small things can be a green or red light. It could be something as simple as somebody wanting to keep their company car, or something like that. You know what I mean? The small stuff like that comes up at the end. And if you're going to be petty about it, to be honest with you, the deal won't get done.
That's very insightful. The small things make such a big difference to people, and kind of sentimental things.
Yeah.
If we just to make kind of things clear for kind of the listeners, so you've sold the printing side of the company now, and you still have a few other businesses that are more marketing service now.
Exactly. So we have in Kith and Kin is an independent network of creative agencies, and within that we have Pluto, who are based in Dublin, and our creative brand experience business, TAP, which are based in Dublin and expertly integrate brand and environment. Bloom are a Dublin-based creative agency specializing in advertising. Then we've Vast, which is a video business and does social and digital. And then in the UK, we have a business called ZPS, which is a merchandising and product sourcing business. It does a lot of glassware and does some really nice work in the UK drinks industry. They're all independent companies. They've all run independently with independent managers, but we're in a family that can interact with each other, and when the time is right, pitch together to try and get business at a bigger level.
Brilliant. And why did you rebrand LWA?
So LWA was officially the TPI group. When the guys bought TPI from me, they obviously wanted the name. They wanted their name back along with the company. So I had to change it, and I just changed it to my three kids' names, Lucy, William, and Andrew. So basically LWA stands for the three kids. When we wanted to put it into a brand in the marketplace and actually do something with it, we decided to rebrand it. We spent about a year coming up with the name Kith and Kin, because we are a family. We do compete. We do have similar skills in some areas, but we are also quite tight. So I thought Kith and Kin was a good name for that. We did a lovely job on the branding. We did a nice website. And the next challenge now is how to attack the marketplace in a way that resonates for the clients, because we have to be able to say to the clients, yes, we are independent, but when we come together, it's seamless. It works really well for you. We can end up with a situation where we deliver a great package for you, because you don't need all of the skills in the group. You just need certain ones, and we'll be the ones to decide how we put them together and how we package it and deliver it for you. And I think we're still getting that right. But when we do get it right, the client will be very comfortable to deal with Kith and Kin. It's a business that supplies great solutions for them at a really high level, using all sorts of different creative methods to deliver a return on investment, which we talked about earlier.
And can you walk us through an example, Colin, of how the Kith and Kin Group as a whole can help a business?
So, for example, TAP are very good on environmental design. So if you had a retail bank, you're going to talk to an ad agency about your advertising. You're going to talk to either them or a social and digital company about your social and digital. You're going to probably have an events business that organize your events. And then you're going to have a sort of a branch of the bank, which are effectively doing up and making the branches look the way, look and feel correct. What we can do is we can put a team together to do all of those things for you. So we're in a situation where we'll have experts in TAP, they're expert on environment. In Pluto, they're experts on events. In Pluto and Bloom, they've got great social and digital. So all of those businesses can basically come together to offer you a brilliant service. I think the key is that we sell it in the right way, so it doesn't feel like it's a whole lot of different companies. It feels like just one company. But when we put the creatives of the different companies together, the ideas and the brave thinking that comes from it is incredible.
And the importance of brand is very much at the heart of the services of TAP Design Consultancy, our sponsors of the podcast.
TAP for over 10 years has been helping to shape and define brands and how they turn up in the market. Whether it's within healthcare, hospitality, workplace or retail, the strength of brand is always the focal point of connecting with customers.
And it's through the sponsorship of TAP Design Consultancy, we can explore fantastic conversations such as these. And if you're building a brand and want to shape meaningful customer experiences, then visit www.wearetap.ie or email hello@wearetap.ie for more information and start your brand journey today.
Now, let's get back to our conversation.
I don't know what it is, but I've always liked smaller companies more than bigger companies in terms of my skill set and our ability to perform at a high level. Each of the MDs and the bosses of each company are really good at looking after their customers. And we're thinking that as we bring them together, we're going to keep that ethos and try and make sure that we do a good job for big companies and small companies. Because whether you have a marketing budget of, say, 500,000 or 50 grand, it's all you have and it has to work for you. And it's really important that you're getting value for money.
Yeah, I think so. Like, basically, if a company comes from you, it doesn't matter how big or small it is, you can help them with any sort of marketing solution, as you said, from an event that needs to be run or merchandise or teeth case maybe.
And what I'd say is this: anyone who wants to get in touch with me, reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me what your issue or your problem is, and I'll happily help. And if it's not us that can help you, I'll tell you that. But what I would say is I'm more than happy to help any business of any size and try and be helpful. I'm now at the point where, to be honest with you, I would be very, very keen to help other people be successful and use their marketing budgets well. And I genuinely think there's an awful lot of businesses out there that need help to grow the top line. We found it tough. We found this year tough. Last year was nothing to write home about. This year is tough. There's a lot of businesses out there that aren't booming. And I would say to you that they need to look at their marketing and their branding and maybe their location and maybe their route to market, maybe the way that they're putting themselves out there digitally. I think all of those things can be improved, and I think they're probably working on that themselves. But if they want help, we're more than happy to talk to them.
We'll put your contact details in the bio of the podcast. So, what are some of the most exciting companies then you're working with at the moment?
Well, I just look at it there. We've got a great mix of companies for. We've got big and small. So we've got Musgraves is a business I actually admire hugely. They're a world-class retailer based here in Ireland and an Irish company. When you look at how Musgraves do things in Super Value or in Centra or in Daybreak, they're just really, really good at what they do. And they know exactly how to do it. So they come to us with a very, very mature ask. They know what they're looking for and they know exactly what they're going to get. And Tap, since they opened, we opened Tap, and a month later Musgraves put us on retainer. We've been on retainer with them for 10 years, and you don't do that unless you're working very, very hard and doing the right things. I think there's other businesses we've worked with, like Leia, for example, where they were putting in their healthcare facilities, and we worked really, really well with them. One of the proudest boasts I think Bloom has, the advertising agency Bloom has, is when they started working with Brady Family Hams, they were number 7 in the market. They're now number 1 in the market. And I think you'll remember that some of the TV ads that Brady's have come up with over the years, they've been brilliant. But I really love the fact that that's been a long-term relationship to get the best out of both companies. And I think it has worked very, very well. And we did a lovely job with Pentmania recently, where they've won design awards for how those retail outlets work. And we've got a lot of other companies that we deal with where they bring us in for certain types of work, and we're trying very hard to maybe grow into other areas within it. And all of the businesses, I think, are doing a lovely job for varying size clients, and I think all of them are ambitious to do better.
I was just going to say, personally, Colin, I found the studying the business before the podcast really interesting. All the aspects it has, I think, is incredible. But so we'll get on to kind of the more personal side of things. The business has changed so much in the 30 years you've been in there. How have you become so comfortable with that change?
It's become literally, it just never stops. And actually, to be honest with you, it's accelerating, which worries me as I get a bit older, because I'm wondering, when will it slow down? I don't think it ever will. Our business is now completely challenged and given massive opportunities by the area of AI. I'm not a tech guy at all, so I worry about that, and I make sure we're talking about that all the time, because I know that's the next wave that will change. And I'm a big believer in what I think it was Bill Gates said: nothing changes as much as you think in a year, but much more than you think in a decade. I think we will see in 10 years' time absolutely unbelievable change to the way we do business and the people that are doing business. It is shocking to me how quickly things move on. And a good idea a year ago is no longer a good idea and needs to be changed into something else. So I worry that as I get older, I worry about the pace of it. But every business in the group has got very, very relaxed about the fact that tomorrow is not going to be the same as today. And planning for next year is about as good as you could do.
Does AI scare you, Colin?
It does
Like
in
to scare you?
it does in a way, and excites me in a way. It scares me in the fact that I'm not an expert at it, but it excites me in the same way as I'm talking to you now on a piece of kit that was unimaginable when I started work first. Like when I started work in the print business, believe it or believe it not, we used to show the artwork on a hard board with black and white bromides, as they were called, and there'd be a slash of color on a piece of tracing paper. And the clients used to have to figure out whether they were happy or unhappy with that job. Like now, it's just so much different. So I'm actually genuinely a little bit excited by how it will work. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, I'm not scared the way that, I'm not scared to the point where I would worry about it. I would be scared that to make sure that I keep up with it, if you know what I mean, or I try and keep up with it, or I hire people, or we have people in the group that are actually smart enough to tell us this is what we need and this is what we don't.
Great. Will we move on, Sean, to the questions for the road? So, Colin, if you were if you were in charge of the Irish government for a year, what changes would you make to make doing business in Ireland easier?
Okay, so what I would do is, I think our biggest problem and our biggest challenge is to keep the talent that I saw leave when I was a 20-something-year-old and seems to go generation after generation out of the country. The challenge is to keep them in the country more and more. And I think the biggest problem we face, and I don't think this is going to be revolutionary for you to hear, is housing. We need to get to the point where we build an awful lot more houses. So I would dissipate or take out the 13.5%, I think it is, VAT rate on building, and just say that's gone for 2 years. So everything that we can build in the next 2 years, there's no VAT on, and hope that the builders don't pass it on to the poor old buying public, and get as much building done in the next 24 months as we can. Because at the moment, to me, it seems like there's an awful lot of things finishing, apartment blocks, housing estates, and I'm not seeing enough starting. And I'm really worried about what we're doing there. It seems like we're going in the wrong direction there rather than the right direction. So I think the government needs to do something really radical with housing to make the construction industry boom, but most importantly of all, to get people affordable rents and affordable places to live.
What's one thing you do in business, Colin, that other people might find unusual or weird, but works really well for you?
I think you have to take advantage of whatever area you're in. So, for example, when we were in the printing business, we used to have quite an attractive place to visit. A printing factory is not something that people would always see, and they'd quite like to visit. So we used to invite people up, but we didn't just do that. I met a brilliant woman called Helen Ryan who ran Craigana in Galway. And she told me that when they used Galway as the location to bring people in from America selling medical equipment, stents and things like that. So what they would do is they would use the fact that they were in the middle of nowhere, almost, when you looked at it worldwide, to basically fly them in, bring them to the factory. And she said, when they come, we have their parking space with a name on it. And then we have in reception, we have their name in reception. And then we will make sure that everyone in the company knows that Peter is visiting today from such and such. So they all feel like rock stars when they come over to visit us. And we've, I think she said, a 95% win rate of people who visited the factory to giving us the tender and giving us the business. So when I brought that back to our business, we had signs for people when they visited Font House when we were a printing company, and in reception a sign, and everyone knowing that the person was coming and who they were. And I saw hard-nosed procurement people down beside their sign, taking a picture, taking a selfie of themselves with their parking sign before they came in to visit us. So
As you would.
I would say every business uses whatever they can within their sort of realm to try and make people feel a bit special and a bit different. And I think it's different in each company. And we're trying hard to be thoughtful and do the right things in every company. So we do stuff that, helps other businesses, helps charities, things like that. And I think we're always trying to think of things that we can do that would make a difference and maybe make us look better and do good.
It's the simple things, isn't it, that can go so far. So if you were starting out in business now, Colin, how would you go about making your first million?
Well, I suppose you probably have to do something that maybe would be a little different. I was thinking about, you know, it's funny how businesses, I was stuck in a meeting the other day and I wasn't really enjoying it. And it wasn't a meeting, it was kind of a presentation and I wasn't really paying much attention. I was early in the morning and I wasn't at my best. So what I did was I came up with a business plan, and my latest business plan, which I probably won't do, so I will share with you, is there should be in every big golf club in Ireland, there should be a car wash. So when you're playing your golf, you should be able to get your car washed. So if I was starting a business and wanted to make a million, I would put 10 car washes into 10 of the busier golf clubs. I'd run it 6 or 7 days a week. I'd give you a car valet or a car wash or a mini valet while you're playing your round of golf. And you have a captive audience there. And I'm sure you could do a deal with the golf club that maybe you don't pay rent and you just have a percentage of the turnover for them. And therefore your overhead would be very little. You'd probably need 2 people 6 days a week maybe. And I think it would probably make money and do well.
So, yeah, we definitely won't be won't be airing that one because I think that one's probably too good to let other people know about.
Especially we're big golfers as well. So.
Yeah.
Well, then you'll know. Wouldn't it be nice to come back to your car and it's at least washed or maybe even valeted?
Yeah, actually, you're playing for 4 hours. There'd be no waiting around either. Yeah. Yeah. So I actually had a follow up on that question. What are your thoughts on buying a business instead of starting a business if you're trying to get into business for the first time?
That's a very good question for this reason. When people are selling businesses, they have taken a view on the value and the future of that business or themselves within it. And often they're looking at it as a time when the arrows are pointing up, which is the right time to sell, by the way, not when the arrows are pointing level or down, when they're pointing up. And I would say be cautious because you need to know what you're buying. And it's very difficult to look from the outside and realize what a business is in its essence. So, for example, when I was started the first time due diligence, I would have got involved with due diligence. I thought due diligence would get every single thing you could possibly need to know about a business out of a business. That's nonsense. The first thing they do is they tell you, we're going to have a look at this business, don't sue us if we're wrong type of thing. And that's the documentation you sign. But beyond that, they do their best to try and get under the bonnet. But in the end, you can never know as much about a business as the seller. So you have to be cautious on price. If you can buy a business that's successful, it's far easier than a business that you have to turn around. And if you can buy a business where you can actually keep the existing management team in place for a period, that's much better. And I've always done it that way, where you can keep people for a year, 2 years, or 3 years, but at least they're staying involved so you don't have to start from scratch. Because some of the business walks out the door with the seller. And it's very important that you come up with a way that maybe keeps them involved or excites them and make it gives them a new lease of life. When we bought McGill Print, Alec McGill was coming in the morning. He was putting on his white coat. He was guillotining jobs. He was packing jobs. Then he was taking his white coat off, going in to sell in Bank of Ireland and other customers, Aer Lingus and all these other customers he had. Then he was coming back in the evening to basically do the invoicing and send out the invoices. He was doing everything in the business. And the first thing I said to him was, when we bought it, I said, all I want you to do is sell, but I want you to stay with the business. So we agreed he'd stay for 3 years. He ended up staying for 23 years. So what I would say to you is, the key is that you know what you're getting.
From all the businesses that you've bought, you must have come up with some ways of getting more out of due diligence than what the accounting firm can do. So what, any tips?
I was told by my mentor and the guy who gave me the most business advice in my life, my dad, Jim Culliton, I was told you can't do good business with bad people. So what I do is I invent reasons to spend time with the people involved. And I try really hard to spend time talking to them, because that's where you pick up the bits that due diligence don't. And I remember I looked at a business one time and they hadn't paid a couple of debtors for a long time and they were quite small. And I asked about this, and it turned out that one of them was a copywriter and one of them was a photographer, and they hadn't needed to use them again. So they hadn't paid them the previous time. And I really found that annoying. And in the end, that business I was actually nearly getting for free, and I didn't take it. And I know that sounds weird, but I didn't like what was happening in the business, and I wasn't going to be able to change it that radically. The manager was staying on, and I just decided not to buy that business. And as I say, it wasn't a huge amount of money involved. It was a cultural thing. I just felt you always pay your debts and you always pay the people that need the money. And just because you don't need them a second time wouldn't leave them on the long finger. So it's how you spend the time with the seller is key. Get as many meetings as you can. Visit the place. Kick the tires. Look around and try and see what's going on, because you'll see stuff you just won't see in the figures. You just won't see in the books.
Great advice.
That's really, really, really insightful. Last one, Colin. What for you is a life well lived, and how do you make the most of it?
Well, I think business is an important part of life, and certainly if you run your own business or you own your own business, it's a very important part of your life. But actually, in the end, life is about family. And I remember somebody saying to me, "There's," I won't say it. It's a bit rude. I was going to say something, but I won't. But basically,
Well, say it. Say it.
okay. Well, a businessman told me when I was young and impressionable. He said, "Colin, there's no point in making millions and millions if the postman is shagging your wife." And truthfully, I took that on board, and I really do genuinely believe I tried to get the balance right in terms of spending time with the family. So we had family dinner almost always together. Now that meant my poor starving kids were waiting till 7 o'clock till I got home and ate with them. But what I would say is it was an important part of my life, and I wouldn't have done the business part without the family part. So what I would say to you is, in the end, family first. It's more important. And I think if you lose sight of that, you end up a little bit kind of mean and twisted and bitter at the end when you're looking back. I had a great guy work for me called Alistair Wallace, who I really enjoyed working with. And he said, his dad said to him that in the end, life is only just a whole series of kind of boring stories that you tell on the fireside to younger people. And I think make the stories as less boring and as exciting as you can. So I think life is about having some good stories by the time you're old enough to kick it up and enjoy the side of the fire.
Amazing.
That's brilliant, Colin. Colin, thanks so much. I honestly feel like we could have sat here for another 3 hours, and the conversation would have been just as good. So I'm actually, it was an amazing conversation, but I'd love to go on for another 2 or 3 hours. But thanks so much.
Not a problem. It was a joy.
This week's podcast is sponsored by Top Design Consultancy.
Looking to elevate the ordinary into extraordinary through branded experiences.
Visit www.wearetap.ie or email hello@wearetap.ie for more information.